So, Berto, in today's episode, I just want to go over some emails from patrons and whatnot. What do you say?
That's always fun.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor.
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I polish footballs.
You polish footballs.
So a little known fact, before every major NFL game, the footballs have to be polished. Otherwise, they don't fly the right way.
So this first email is from patron Juliana. So I should say that I recently have been, I put a call out for people. I've always asked for people to send in their questions, right?
Yeah.
And people send in their questions and we respond. And it occurred to me, and then someone asked me, I think it was famous patron Lyndon, he actually asked me like this really simple, tiny little question. Like, what's your favorite movie or something? Can you talk about that on the podcast? Or something really quick I could answer. And I was like, oh my God, I love that. Like a very fast question that won't require me to do a deep dive for 5 weeks. That is just a question, it's
Right.
just a thing. So we got some of that today. So patron Juliana asks, if you were able to invite 3 famous psychology types to a dinner party, dead or alive, who would you invite and why? So Berto, I'm going to present mine, but I want you to just think about 3 people because you probably don't know 3 psychology types.
All right.
So for me, do you want to take a guess as to who I would say first here?
These are like famous psychologists. Is that what this is?
Famous psychology types. Yeah.
What do you mean types?
Well, it could be psychologists or other professions or just, related to the field.
Oh, I see. Well, okay. Either way, I'm sure you'd want Freud in there.
Right. Awesome. So Freud is definitely my first person. There's so many questions. He lived in a different time, and I would be so curious to hear his updated opinions about things. I've been doing this deep dive on his view on LGBTQ issues.
Okay.
And he had a for his time an extremely modern viewpoint.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'm going to go into it in another podcast episode, or I already have because this is coming out later. But anyway, and after him, actually, his daughter, Anna Freud, went backward. And a lot of other people started to get more into conversion therapy, But Freud has this famous letter where he writes this mother, and he's like, there's nothing, basically the gist of the letter is there's nothing wrong with being gay, and it doesn't really respond to psychoanalysis anyway, so I wouldn't worry about it. Essentially was his letter.
Wow, that is really modern.
Right. And so but he did say that homosexuality is an immaturity that is held on to. So essentially it's like what his hypothesis or his theory is that we're all born a little homosexual. And through maturity, we learn to just be heterosexual. And so if you're an adult and you have homosexual tendencies, you have retained an immaturity. And if you matured more, you would actually just want to actually be with people of the opposite gender, which is not the best attitude, right?
I have this picture of you open the door and you see your buddy Joe and your buddy Steve going at it, and all you can say is, grow up! So I would really want to ask him questions. I'd be like, there's been research, and here's how our society has changed, and I, not only just that, but just I really want to debate with him about his Oedipus complex. I'd want to debate with him about his Wolfman interpretations. There's just a lot of things that I have problems with. I'm just because in my head, he was there. The field wasn't a huge field at the time, right? And
there's very little research, particularly in the areas that he was talking about. And so he basically had to make up a lot of stuff, and it's actually genius that he ended up making up stuff that's still relevant today.
Right. It's not like you could have been like, so you didn't watch that one TED Talk the other day?
Exactly. So I would want to see if I could convince him that
the dumb ideas that I think he had are actually dumb, and he could modify them.
Interesting.
You know, like the Oedipus complex, for example, of just like, well, so just to tell you, research, blah blah blah, and here's my opinion, and what do you are you really being literal when you talk about? You know, I'd have so many questions.
He'd be like, I think you only say that because you have an Oedipal complex.
Because you haven't. Another person I'd love to talk to is Virginia Satir. She's not with us anymore, but she was a fascinating family therapist from the 70s and 80s that I've seen a lot of videos of. And again, just so many questions. She was a fascinating person. She's this tall, Scandinavian, Midwestern woman, Scandinavian descent. And she, in her family sessions, she didn't just sit and talk to people. She would move around in the seat. She would touch people. She would go to a teenage girl and she would put her hand on the girl's stomach and say like, is this where your anger is coming from? And she would hold the girl. Now, whenever I show the videos to students, they're always like just gasping. They're just like, violation.
Trigger warning.
Yeah. Well, they don't say that, but they naturally there's a gasp of just like she's just touching these people without asking. It's a very strange therapist behavior, but she pulls it off. Clients never react badly. They're always quite taken by her. But anyway, I would have a bunch of questions because she had a kind of an interesting theory as well about people. The whole idea about self-esteem kind of comes from her.
Right.
And I cheated, Juliana. You said 3, I got 4. So I'd also like to talk to Rogers and Fritz Perls.
I see it. A duo.
Yeah.
Little duo.
Yeah. Carl Rogers, mainly I just would want to hug him. And with Fritz Perls, I would want to really argue with that.
Play some chess.
Yeah. What about you, Berto? Who's 3 famous?
Well, I'll try to keep the theme. So Carl Jung, how do you say it? Jung?
Yeah, CGU.
Okay. And mostly with him, I would start trying to see if Jordan Peterson is right about his assessments of Carl Jung's theories.
Yeah.
And then, mostly...
actually, Jung would be... I would love to talk to that guy, too.
Yeah.
For similar reasons of Freud, because there's just so many questions I'd be like wanting to update or try to like say, so when you were saying this, were you saying this?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then, so Jean Piaget, is that...
Okay.
You say? I would talk to him. He wrote on Death and Dying, right? That's one of his books, I think.
On Death and Dying?
On Death and Dying.
I think you're mixing it up with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
Okay, then I want to talk to her.
Very different from Piaget.
I want to talk to her and Piaget for different reasons then. So I want to talk to her about that book, which must have been in my dad's bookshelf right next to a Piaget book.
Okay.
Because I was always so fascinated as a child of the title, because...
Oh, that's right.
Right? Remember this? I thought it was like you're on death and then dying.
Yeah.
And the book was on death and dying.
Yeah.
But I think it's such a fascinating topic of like, what goes through the psychology of people as they enter those phases of their.
I think she recently passed away. Right. So she developed the famous 5 stages of grief.
Yeah.
And
I didn't know that, but
yeah.
So that would be another great reason to talk to her.
And the book on Death and Dying is her seminal book that I think might be one of the most popular books. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl is another one. So it doesn't surprise me that your dad had that book. He probably also had Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. In this book by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she writes about her experience talking with patients in a hospital that she worked at who knew they were going to die soon.
Yeah.
So the book is on death and dying, meaning that what the experiences are of people as they wrestle with the fact that they are going to die within the next few weeks. And the book is actually very good. It's a very good book. She talks eloquently and succinctly. It's a short book, actually, about all these different stories and her experience of this. And it's something we don't talk about in our society,
Right.
But a tiny little detail of that book is she talked about phases that people went through. They would go into denial about, it's like, I'm not going to die. I'm going to live, the doctors are saying I'm going to die in a month, but they don't know anything.
Right.
Or just trying to put it out of your mind, which makes sense, right? If someone tells you you've got 3 weeks to live, I'm guessing there would be at least a portion of time where you're just like,
no.
Yeah. Oh, wait. So there's shock. So so there's shock of just like, wait, what? And then there's denial, and then there's like anger, then there's bargaining.
Right.
So the bargaining thing always confuses people when it comes to grief, because it's like, well, how do you bargain with grief? And, they sort of adapted that. But originally it's like, well, if I pray to God,
right, sure,
I can bargain with God. It's like, I'll dedicate the rest of my life to charity if you let me live another 5 years or something. So that kind of bargaining, and then acceptance.
Yeah.
And so the 5 stages of grief became what Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was known for entirely. Mm-hmm. She became extremely famous for these 5 stages of grief, which I think is a little bit of a tragedy, because if you actually read her books, the 5 stages of grief aren't like especially in the beginning, aren't like a big part of her writing.
Oh, interesting.
And her books are actually still completely relevant today. Anyway.
Well, so the interesting thing is, I think I was maybe 8, and I was lying on my dad's bed, like maybe a lazy Saturday morning, and I'm looking at his bookshelf, and I see that book.
And you think it's like someone writing about how I was on top of death.
Yeah, well.
And I was dying.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't quite make out the exact meaning, but it felt scary, like it felt like sort of a Halloween type book, And I was like, and I remember I did ask my dad eventually.
I was wrestling with death, and I got on top of him.
Exactly.
And then I started dying.
So that was fascinating. But anyways, I actually would like to talk to Piaget, because I think so. I'm very interested in artificial intelligence and in computers and things like that. And there is so much, I think, of the research he did about that is applicable, about how like children can learn. And I think that I would be very interested to talk to him about that.
Great.
Children.
So,
talk to him about children.
So let's go on to next. We got patron Debbie. She wrote in a follow-up to our my episode in which I talked about pedophilia, and she brought up a number of interesting points that I wanted to talk about. That. And so she said there's actually, because in the podcast I'm like, maybe there is a movement for pedophiles, people who are attracted to kids sexually, who want to remain abstinent and not abuse children. Mm-hmm. And she said there's actually a movement called virtuous pedophiles.
Interesting.
Who are non-offending pedophiles. So there's that. She also, I in those episodes, I did a couple episodes on pedophilia, and I tried to stay away from doing a lot of talk about why it develops in people, but I did go into it a little bit. I went into that discussion about how you develop fetishes, right? And so, and by extension, how a child might develop a sexual attraction for children, because they basically become imprinted early in life to associate sex with prepubescent people or people of a certain age, because of weird things that happen or abuse or something. But what I should have said in that episode is like, look, I'm not going to lay out all the theories of how this develops, because I just don't have time to do that. But anyway, Debbie points out one possible cause that I didn't talk about, which is that sometimes a child or a young person, say a 15-year-old or a 14-year-old, let's say it's a 14-year-old boy, for whatever reason, lacks social skills and is not very comfortable around people his own age.
Okay.
So 14-year-old boy, he wants to have sex, as any 14-year-old boy, or as many 14-year-old boys do. And he starts to try to interact with other 14-year-old girls, but he has a complete lack of social skills, or he has serious deficits, and he has or he's always had trouble relating to people's own age. But through his experiences, he's learned I can really relate to 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds. As I've been growing up developmentally, I feel much more at ease with people who
Right.
are 5 years younger than me. And so as your sexuality emerges, you end up attaching sexuality to younger people because you just feel comfortable with younger people.
I see.
So that's one. Also, she talks about how there's a lot of Patron Debbie apparently specializes in this, I think. But anyway, she talks about how there's horror stories of pedophiles seeking out counseling and being rejected by therapists who refuse to work with them.
Oh, wow.
So there's that.
That doesn't help.
And we did talk a little bit about sex offender restrictions and the sanctions they put on, they say you can't be within a school and you have to register and all that stuff. And she had no good words to say about this sort of stuff, because she says that basically what this does is it isolates the offender from society, and it makes it so that the offender can't integrate and have a normal life anymore. And so they end up being more likely to offend because you imagine you're a registered sex offender and you want to live a good life.
Yeah.
But because you're labeled this way, you can't get a job, you can't make friends, you can't date.
Oh, man.
And then you're just like a frustrated, isolated person who's like drinking, and you're just like, fuck it, I guess I'll just do it. You know what I mean? So that's what she was talking about. Also, she brought up the book called The Trauma Myth, and because I basically talked about how I was probably giving the impression that I believed that all pedophiles were sexually abused, and that's not the case when you look at the research. And I was probably exhibiting a point of view that like every bad thing that every adult does is due to child abuse, which is not true. Humans are more complex than that. Abuse and mistreatment and neglect and weird stuff that happens as kids definitely plays a role and can absolutely be a factor later in life. So it's not as if trauma or weird experiences as children don't cause problems. I mean, we've talked about how you were abused when you were a kid and how that created complications later in life. But what she is contending is like there's this other area where essentially when you're sexually abused as a kid, and maybe you can comment on this, Berto, that the actual sexual abuse itself is not traumatic. The trauma happens when you grow up or later on, and their reaction to you in terms of what happened,
Oh, I see.
It's like people are like, oh my God, what happened? That's so shameful, or it's so horrible. And you're just like, huh, I didn't know it was horrible. And then that proceeds to create a complex in one's mind that creates all the symptoms. What do you think about that, Bert?
I think that must vary dramatically on the details of the abuse. For example, I really struggle to imagine a case where sort of a violent, older adult relative to a younger child set of incidents wouldn't be traumatic, right? But on the other hand, I could certainly imagine many cases where, the 15-year-old cousin and the 8-year-old cousin did some stuff and it's not right and whatever, but maybe maybe the younger person felt okay about it. And years later it comes up and then it's like, what? That's horrible. You were this, you were that. That I could see how that would be post-traumatizing, or maybe at least bring up things that weren't previously affecting them.
Yeah, I think it's extremely complex, and the road to adult dysfunction has many tributaries, and that our reaction when people grow up and they look back on their life and they're like, wait a second, was I sexually abused? There are cases in which the way our society frames that experience can actually create complications for people. Anyway, let's go on to the next. So, Patron Debbie, I just want to thank you for your very interesting email. I liked Patron Debbie's email because I actually learned a lot reading it. and I also was like, oh, I probably should have talked about that too.
Interesting.
You professionals out there, of which I know there are many of you, if you ever have technical knowledge where you're just like, I don't think Kirk gets this, let me send him a quick paragraph, educate him in this area. I love that kind of stuff.
With offensive language and calling you all sorts of bad names.
Yeah, exactly. All right, listener Jennifer wrote in and she writes, if you could have any Star Wars character as a client, who would you choose and why?
Oh, what a great question.
She also says, also, that trailer. Have you seen the new trailer?
Well, I've been in the theater when the trailer has been playing.
But I think there's a
No, I have stayed away.
Right, because remember, we saw a movie recently.
Yeah, and you're like, close your eyes.
The new trailer came on, and I look over at you, and you're looking at it.
Yeah.
Because normally you close your eyes and plug your ears. And
That's true, yeah.
And I was like, why are you doing that, you know?
Yeah. But I did eventually not watch.
Yeah, me too. I kind of glanced at it, but I heard that there's a lot of sort of information they give.
Spoilers.
In the trailer. And so, I mean, some of it might be misdirection and some of it, anyway.
Yeah.
So for me, who I would like as a client, who do you think I would like as a client?
Okay, this is someone you're going to treat. Well, I mean, I think you might actually want a really hard problem like Anakin.
Right. You know me forwards and backwards. Absolutely, Anakin. Because the most benefit can happen if it works.
Yeah, you could save the galaxy.
Right. If you get him to be more insightful, you know, like he could potentially bring balance to the Force by killing the Emperor earlier.
Right.
You know, and not kill all those younglings. You know?
Right, and not care so much about sand.
Yeah. When I was taking notes for this, I realized that the word younglings is recognized by MS Word, which is funny. But anyway, yeah, I would, after episode 3, you know, as he's still a good person in episode 3, I would want to help him grieve his mother's death.
Wait, he's still a good person? No, he's not.
Yeah,
he's already murdered all the...
midway through episode 3, he's a good guy.
Oh, but you said after episode 3.
Oh.
Yeah, well, I think you mean after episode 2.
I would want him as a client before he kills the younglings.
Before he kills the younglings, yes.
And I would want to help him grieve his mother's death. I mean, because that was really hard for him, and he blamed himself.
So he's already slaughtered some sand people, or some whatever.
Right, which is an atrocity, but you could say they kind of deserved it because they, you know, they were.
Is this what you're going to tell them? Listen, I mean, they sort of deserved your murdering of them.
But I would want to help him deal with the grief of that and to not blame himself, and also be able to deal, because you could say Anakin's primary problem is that he couldn't accept the fact that people died, and that's what turned him, is like, and his attachment to people was so strong, and he you know, just it's like, well, if there's a way I can save people from dying, then I'm going to do that.
Right, because that's why he wanted the powers. He wanted the power to bring people back.
Right.
And so would you try to cure his bad memory about not remembering he built C-3PO?
Yeah. I would also try to help him communicate better with the council. I mean, he clearly he clearly wanted to become a Jedi Knight. He wanted to become respected.
Right.
And he was, you know, having trouble. It's just basically a work problem, you know.
Sure.
He wants to get promoted.
Yeah.
And he's paradoxically, because he's being a dick about it, they're not going to promote him, you know. So it's just like, you know, take your time, you're young, and blah blah blah. The other thing I would want to help him with would be trying to figure out whether or not he should be a Jedi or not, because he really loved Padme.
Right, he's sacrificing potentially a lovely family that he could have.
Yeah, it's like you can be Force sensitive and not be a Jedi.
Force sensitive sounds like a...
You could be a good guy. You could still work for Jedi Council, but you just can't be a Jedi Knight. No harm, no foul. Marry Padme. Let it come out in the open. Have kids. Have a good life.
Right.
And do something else. You know,
you're still probably going to give birth to a sort of Leia and Luke. You know.
Yeah. So what about you, Berto?
Oh my gosh, no question. Jar Jar Binks. Think about it. Like, what a fascinating, like, simpleton, right? Like, and especially because I'd be trying to get at, like, is he actually evil? Is he actually controlling all of this?
Yeah.
And it'd be a challenge for me, you know, because if he is evil, he's going to be trying to Jedi mind control me. So, like, part of it is me recording the sessions and trying to see later.
Now you're just trolling everybody.
No.
So we're going to go see episode 8 in December. We got our tickets already.
Yay.
I have tickets for both opening night and then the next night.
And I have tickets for opening night and a week later.
So predictions, what do you think?
Well, no, I mean, it's gonna be good, darn it. But predictions plot-wise, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Ooh, even predicting is sort of spoilery, but I guess I'm going to say, no, of course Luke's not going dark side. I can't have it.
But he could go middle road. Like, didn't you hear where there are people talking about, like, you got the light side and the dark side
and the gray side
and the gray side.
No, I don't want to hear about the gray side, damn it. I do want to say, relationship wise, what's her name? Not Padme. Rey. Rey is not Luke's daughter. I don't think it's Luke's daughter. And I think in the end, there's no romance gonna happen between Rey and freaking Kylo.
No
Ren.
Reylo, huh?
No Reylo.
You're not a Reylo shipper.
No, I'm not a Reylo shipper. No.
What about this Last Jedi bit? I think in the trailer I did see Luke turn around and he's talking to Rey and he's just like, we've got to end the Jedis, essentially.
Well, fine, but the Last Jedi could be both of them.
It's time for the Jedis to come to an end.
Jedi can be plural,
Yeah.
And he may mean not like as in we have to kill all of the Jedi, but rather like we need to change how things work, and so this order doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, interesting.
Like it's like ending the Catholic Church.
How is Leia? Leia has to die, right?
Oh my gosh! And Han already died.
So how is Leia gonna die? Do you think it'll be a confrontation with Kylo or with Luke, or what's gonna happen?
No, we can't have Kylo killing both Han and Leia. That's too much. It's a bridge too far.
Yeah.
Leia's gonna sacrifice herself in some ship.
Ooh.
It's crashing into like one of them big things.
Well, what do you think? What do you think Kylo and the new Emperor? What's his name? Snooky.
Snooky. Yeah.
What do you think they have in store for?
So Snooky wanted Kylo to get damaged because apparently that's part of the equation. So he needs to now complete his training. Because think about it, like Darth couldn't complete his training till he was damaged, and you sort of got the impression that the Emperor needed that to happen. And one of the theories I heard or read or something was that pain is a big part of the equation, and so you cannot reach into the depths of the dark side without feeling ultimate pain.
But what's their next move? With the First Order.
So first of all, Kylo's gonna be initially like doubling down on his thing, but I think he's got a lot of remnant self-doubt and second guessing now. So I don't know if he's ultimately, I think he's going to end up in a situation where he regrets his choices. But in the short order, let's see, they've just gotten their base destroyed. But Snooky's not. Where was Snoke? We don't know where he was, right? He's in some undisclosed location.
Yeah, we don't know where he is.
So where
he could also be
is,
like 5 inches tall.
It's true. So I think what they're gonna try to do is basically take over strategic military locations, like almost like invert the formula. They're the rebels now.
Interesting. Well, if they follow the typical story arch of the trilogy. Something really horrible has to happen by the end of this episode,
But something horrible already happened.
What?
Han.
Yeah, but he wasn't like a central character to. He's not a central character to this new series.
Sure, but I mean, other than Luke losing his hand and Han getting frozen and I see what you're saying.
So those are pretty bad. You got Luke losing his hand. So you got the three people.
Yeah.
Luke loses his hand and Han
gets frozen,
basically, and frozen and taken away.
And as a kid, you're basically like, they killed Han.
Right.
Yeah.
And so something like that. So the ending of episode 8 has to be that sad John Williams song, So we're going to for my birthday, we're going to go to Star Wars Trivia. Do you want to go?
So that weekend I might be in Leavenworth.
Oh, but if you're not.
If I'm not.
It's not
absolutely.
weekend, it's on a Monday.
Oh, then probably. Is it a holiday?
Do you like me? Because if you don't like me, you don't have to go.
Well, I don't like you, but I want to go to Star Wars Trivia.
It's on a Monday.
Okay, if it's on a Monday and that's not a holiday, then probably
okay.
Yes. The reason is because I know that weekend I'm going to be in Leavenworth, but it's probably just the weekend, so I'm probably back Sunday.
You're just making excuses. You just don't like me enough.
I'm not. I promise you, this was a pre-booked ordeal.
So I think I'm pretty. So if anyone else wants to go, because Berto won't, but
I'm going on trivia night, even if I have to crawl back from Leavenworth.
It's on December 4th at the Crocodile. I'll probably be there.
Yes, I'm going to your Star Wars trivia night.
Okay. If any of you people want to go and say hi, do so. Oh, also, by the way, we're going to have a live event.
Oh no, it's not a listener party. It's what is it? A live podcast.
It's a live show. I don't think I'm going to record it though, because I don't want to have to deal with that logistic.
Okay, so it's a live event.
It's a live event.
You will miss if you're not there.
Right. Some people are wanting to webcast it. And, that might be kind of hard. So it's going to be in January. I think January 27. I'm going to start putting out more details as come in.
I'll finally reveal details about my job.
Yeah. And so Berto and I are going to be there, and we'll play Tough or Bluff. And I'm thinking actually another thing that we might do at the live event, Berto, is show pictures of us in the past. Have a slideshow of, and maybe tell stories or something.
Yeah. Bore everyone to tears.
But yeah, this is the first open public live event that we're going to have. People are already making travel plans. Someone asked about a hostel in Seattle, and the only one that I really know about is the Green Tortoise, which is pretty close.
I just watched Hostel 1 through 3 again, so
if people again, I think it's January 27. If you like our Facebook page, I'll be posting. I might even make a Facebook event. I don't know. Anyway, more details to come.
Nice.
But save the date for January 27, I believe. All right, let's take a break, and when we get back, let's continue with emails. All right, we're back from the break. If you haven't become a patron of the podcast yet, do so now. Go to patreon.com. When you become a patron, you get access to all of our different secret patron episodes. Also, you don't have to deal with commercials as much, which is kind of nice. Okay, let's talk about Star Wars. Now, since you might be there at Star Wars Trivia with me.
I will be there.
I thought that we might go over some Star Wars Trivia right now. Because I'm figuring, we got to prep, because we're probably going to lose. You know what I mean?
There are lots of nerdy nerds out there.
Yeah, that's the one thing you realize when you go to trivia events is like, holy crap, there are some trivia nerds out there.
Some verticals.
Yeah. Okay, so what location stood for the forest moon of Endor? What location on Earth? Where did they shoot the scenes of Endor?
Right. Okay. Well, I know that they did. Hoth was Tunisia. Oh no, Tunisia was the desert, and then Iceland, I think, was Hoth. Was it Iceland?
No, it was Norway.
Norway. Okay. So Endor was in Canada.
Nope. Redwoods, California.
Of course.
I
knew that.
What's the name of the famous sound effect that can be heard in every Star Wars movie?
Oh, the Force. It's the.
I'll give you another hint. It's actually in a lot of other movies too.
Oh, so you're not talking about the 50 hertz, the Force.
Right.
Okay. The Wilhelm scream. Or
yeah, very good. Okay. The Wilhelm scream. What game do Chewbacca and R2-D2 play in A New Hope?
It's Wizard's Chess, Harry.
It's Dejaric.
Dejaric? Is that what it's called?
Yeah. What bounty hunter did Han Solo kill in Episode 4?
Episode 4, he killed Greedo.
Yeah.
And Greedo shot first.
Yeah. What Japanese filmmaker did George Lucas famously borrow from while making the Star Wars?
From the Hidden Fortress from Kurosawa.
Yeah. Luke Skywalker's lightsaber was what color?
Well, that's a trick question.
Oh, nice.
The one he built was green, and the one that he was given from his father was blue.
Nice. Okay, so let's go on with some more patron emails here. We have from Chad wrote in. He's saying, "What's up with Jim Carrey? I've been fascinated by these recent interviews with Jim Carrey where he keeps talking about how Jim Carrey never existed. There is no me, etc. I understand his girlfriend committed suicide a couple years ago, and there's been a lot of drama surrounding her death, a wrongful death case being brought against him by her estranged husband, etc. Did you know about that?
I heard about this, but I don't know the details. I saw an article on one of those sites talking about it.
Like what? Like how would Jim Carrey be responsible in some way?
I don't know, but do you think he's pulling a Prince? You know how when Prince had to change his name to a symbol for legal reasons so you could get out of a contract?
Is that true?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It wasn't an artistic choice. Well, maybe it became it, but maybe Jim Carrey's doing a similar thing where it's like, there's never been a Jim Carrey.
Yeah. So Chad asks, has Jim adopted this existential dissociative philosophy as a coping mechanism? Is he okay? Is this normal? Is he losing it? Or is he onto something? Would love to hear your thoughts on this. Brito, what do you think?
Well, first of all, Jim Carrey has always been an extremely fascinating individual. Like, I don't know, did you ever watch his stand-up and his interviews when he was young and all these things?
No.
The guy was never off. He was always on, like sort of like Robin Williams, you know. And second, he has had a very interesting career because he's had some dramatic roles that I really respect.
Yeah.
And then
Eternal Sunshine.
Right. And then for a while, he was making the most money out of anyone.
Yeah.
Right?
The thing that I think some of our younger listeners might not know is that Jim Carrey was the 90s. You know?
Right.
It was like there were years where he was in like 2 or 3 blockbuster movies.
He was getting paid the most money of anyone at the time.
Yeah.
And so there's all that, right? And then the flip side is recently I've seen this stuff about him being an artist and then legitimate art, you know, and doing all these things. So either he's going the Shia LaBeouf route,
What do you
with Shia LaBeouf, at first it looked like he was just doing these really interesting artistic things, but I think he's also got some dependency issues on substances.
Yeah.
So
clearly, I mean, there's several videos of Shia LaBeouf like getting into altercations with cops and saying, "Do you know who I am?"
Right. So I feel like maybe in Jim Carrey's case, he might have done too many drugs, right? The flip side is he may be really into, you know, like a part of his life where he's meditating all the time and getting deeply into art and turning into one of those esoterics that says stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, there, you know, Dali and all these people that are like, you know, the world is square.
Well, are you saying that it's an affectation or?
Well, but I mean, it's hard to like, was John Lennon putting on an affectation when he was sitting in bed with Yoko?
No.
Right? Like, it's hard to say. Is what I'm saying is maybe it's something that in the back of his mind is like, well, I'm still Jim Carrey. But a lot of him is saying, no, I'm not Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
And it's hard to tell because he seems super committed to his art and to this kind of new way of being. But it could just be drugs.
Yeah.
It could just be drugs.
Well, so here are my thoughts. In terms of him losing it, I don't think he's losing it. I've seen enough interviews with him to take a stab and say that his brain is working fine. He doesn't seem to be disoriented or anything like that. He seems to be quite sharp still. I'm guessing he is definitely suffering from something. I mean, imagine your girlfriend dies and so there's 2 scenarios. One is that he was responsible in part for his girlfriend's death.
Sure.
In which case, that's got to mess you up. Or you were totally not responsible for it.
But she still died.
And now people are blaming you.
Right.
And society is now looking at you funny. You know, it's like you were this comedic, funny guy, and now all of a sudden were you partially responsible for your girlfriend dying?
Well, and do you remember? So he was married to what's her name from
McCarthy?
Yeah, Jenny McCarthy, and they had a son, and he was autistic, right? And do you remember that they got onto all this anti-vax stuff and all these things?
Yeah.
And he was very militant for a while about that.
Yeah.
So I think he was already struggling with a lot of it, very heavy emotional stuff years back.
Right. So the little I know about Jim Carrey's life is he and his family lived in a van, I think. They were homeless, I think in Canada. I'm not quite sure. So I think he had kind of a difficult life, and I think he developed comedy as a way of coping with all that. So I think he, has been struggling with some demons his entire life. But yeah, I haven't seen all the interviews, but I've seen enough to indicate to me that he's putting on a show. You're Jim Carrey and you're this huge personality, and you're always, and whenever the camera is on you, people want to know what you're going to do. And so I think it's two things. I think it's a few things, actually. I think on one hand, I think he's tired of being the funny guy. He's just, imagine being Jim Carrey and people shove a microphone in your face.
Be funny guy.
Yeah. Be funny, monkey. And you're just like, God, I don't want to do that anymore, but he still wants fame, because if he didn't want the attention, why is he going on Jimmy Kimmel?
Right.
Why is he showing up to fashion shows and yelling at, interviewers? Why is he doing documentaries about his art? I mean, he clearly likes to be in the spotlight. Right. And so why would you do that? I mean, if you're legitimately losing your mind, or if you're legitimately
over it,
then just do something else.
Yeah.
Don't go on Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah.
You're not pushing any movie or anything. Just do your art. You probably make a good living, because people would be like, "Oh, I wonder what Jim Carrey is doing with his art." He probably has a shit ton of money in the bank, and so
I wonder if he's pulling remember Joaquin Phoenix,
right?
And he really owned it for like a year, and then
I don't think Carrey's doing that. He might claim that later on, because he did do that movie about Andy Kaufman,
right?
And so he could be adopting. So I think that's kind of integrated into there too.
He certainly had a lot of respect for Andy Kaufman,
right?
And now did you hear there's this documentary coming out of the making of that movie?
Yeah,
which seems fascinating.
Yeah. So there are clear motivations that he still wants to be famous. His organization, his thoughts are not jumbled. He definitely, at any time he comes across as jumbled, from my observation, it seems like he's trying to come across as jumbled. He's spouting a lot of like college stoner things, like, I'm not Jim Carrey, man. Jim Carrey does, it's just like, come on, like, it's like he's trying to act enigmatic.
I'm not Jim Carrey.
Yeah. And it's like, again, if I was just hanging out with Jim Carrey and he was talking this way, I'd be like, oh, okay. But he's going on TV and he's showing up at fashion shows and he's doing all those other things. And it's like, he's absolutely seemingly trying to portray himself in a certain way. Now, is he suffering? I would guess yes. At the very least, having your girlfriend die, right?
Yeah.
So is he suffering from something? Is he mentally ill? I don't think so. Is he, like, actually, when you watch the documentary about his art, he comes across as totally calm, totally coherent. He just loves art. He's just like, man, the colors. And then you look at his paintings and you're actually like, whoa, that's actually pretty good.
Yeah, like the guy's multidimensional.
Yeah, I mean, his paintings are actually pretty interesting and different. Like he has some different styles that he's kind of dealing with.
Because I mean, his talent level was off the charts, because he, physical comedy wise, like almost no one could touch him, right?
Yeah.
And then he was intrinsically funny, like the way he said things, the way he like phrased everything, such an intuition for it. But then he turns out to be a great actor,
right,
on top of it. And now he's like an artist, like a legitimate artist. Like it's crazy,
right? So I think that for him, I think there's a few things that could be. This is all speculation, of course. But I think there's another part of it of like, he's probably not getting the best roles anymore. And so he's probably like, well, so I don't really have to put on that act anymore of being like, being like liked by everybody.
Sure.
But I like being famous and I like my art and I'm really into my art. So I want people to pay attention to that. There's also this thing that kind of happens in art shows that I think encourages people to act enigmatic, because when people go to an art show, and they meet the painter, they meet the artist. What they don't want to hear is the guy's like, I don't know, I just fucking paint.
That's what I was gonna say. Just tell me about this painting. Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, do you like the colors? I like the colors.
Yeah. Or like, I don't know, I saw this picture in Vogue and I kind of wanted to like replicate it, and it came out weird, and
it didn't. I mean, trust me, what you're seeing is not what I tried to paint.
So I went to the Seattle Art Fair couple months ago. I think you better saw pictures on Facebook when I went.
Yeah.
And there's thousands of artists in this one, convention center downtown Seattle. And I got a chance to talk to many different artists, and it was so interesting to see the way different artists present themselves.
Interesting.
And there was this one guy who presented himself in this very normal way. He was just like, he was just kind of like, I don't know, I just kind of like doing it. It's just sort of an obsession of mine, and and it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of interesting. And he talked like a frat guy, actually, like the things, the stereotypical frat guy, like the things he talked about. He didn't have that artist persona. And I walked away from that going like, that was weird, like what I want to hear is like, it symbolizes my inner madness,
right?
And the vastness of the, I was watching Carl Sagan, and I had the connection with the universe, and this is what I saw. That's what you want to hear.
Like, you're like, what does this apple symbolize? It figures a bourgeois, like you would say something like that.
Right. That's what you want to hear, man. You don't want to hear, I don't know, it just kind of looks cool.
Yeah.
And so it totally encourages that, because that's just the culture of...
Have we just totally trashed artists?
No, I love art, and I have actual art. Right. Actually, one of the reason why I went there is because one of our very first guests on the show, Patrice Donahue, who was the sand tray therapist that did a sand tray. That was like episode 4 or something.
Yeah.
People still watch that. It's from 2008. People still watch that all the time.
I loved that. I still have my pictures from that.
Yeah, and so she actually is still a friend of mine and got me tickets to get. I think you have to be. It was the opening night in which it's a lot less crowded, and they have like free drinks and food and stuff.
You haven't used me as a guinea pig in a while.
Yeah, we got to get the last one would have been yoga therapy, maybe, or improv therapy.
Yeah, I don't remember the last one, but
music therapy.
Those are always fun.
Yeah. Anyone out there who lives in the Seattle area and you want to come on the podcast and make Berto into a guinea pig. But yeah, so I think that might be part of it too. Again, it's all speculation. But I don't think he's going mentally ill. It'd be very unusual for someone to develop some kind of delusional disorder at that age anyway. All right, let's go on to another email. This is from patron Bridget. This is a follow-up to common confidentiality mistakes.
I just stabbed my eye trying to scratch my eye.
Why would you do that?
Because I have no coordination. I banged like my finger into my eye really hard.
And you probably got some polish in your eye too.
Yes, football polish.
Patron Bridget says, when a parent brings their kid in, should we ask the parent to sign a consent for treatment? So I did a whole episode on common confidentiality mistakes. It might be a patron-only episode. And one of the things I talked about was how therapists will treat families and fail to get consent to treatment from everyone involved.
Oh.
And so she's like, and she's a therapist, and basically what she says in this email is, she's like, well, a lot of parents just drop their kids off and they want you to fix the kid, and they refuse to come in. Mm-hmm. And when they do come in and you're trying to talk with them, if you were to say, can you please sign this thing saying you consent to treatment? A lot of parents will say like, well, no, I'm not the client. It's my kid. And so, what am I supposed to do? And she gives this example of that she supervised a case where the parents brought in their 14-year-old son in for treatment after being abused by the father, and the parents are still together, and the son presented with depression and anger, and it was clearly related to being abused by his father. Ugh. And the parents became very angry at the therapist for suggesting that the abuse had something to do with it.
Oh man.
And soon after, they stopped bringing the son in and that sort of thing. So what do you say to that, Berto?
Well, can't you just like tell them that it's for a raffle? You know, lie to them.
Just sign the thing.
Sign this. Raffle.
Well, you joke, but actually, there's a fair amount of therapists and agencies that kind of do that. They'll throw like just a slew of forms at people.
Oh.
And just you have to sign this, and they'll kind of summarize it in a way that makes it more likely that they'll sign it. And I've certainly seen that. But anyway.
Well, no, I mean that's a really hard question. I'm sure that. Ideally, of course, you have to get the consent. Stepping away for a second from what's legally required, I think of if you're trying to help a child and there's a moment in which just a little bit of engagement from the parent can help, there, in my mind, there is a bit of a gray zone as to like, when did I start treating the parent?
Right. So that's a really interesting and confusing topic for therapists.
Yeah.
But what I say is, when in doubt, ask for consent.
Yeah.
Like if you think, am I treating the parent right now or am I not?
Right.
Well, if you're asking that question,
Ask for consent.
then you can't get in trouble for asking for consent when you don't engage in therapy. You know what I mean? But you can be in trouble for
Not asking and then
right. So if there's a question mark, ask. You know, and plus it's not that hard is the thing in my book. But yeah, it's a massive problem, and in a lot of ways. But a lot of parents will do this. They'll drop off their kid and they'll be like, fix my kid, and I don't want to come into therapy. But and I was just talking with the supervisee about this today. There's this attitude that develops in these agencies where it's us versus them. It's similar in schools, where it's just like, the parents, the parents and the parents and da-da-da. And the thing I always say is, people come to therapy because they have problems. So parents are, they don't just, the parents who are presenting problems in their parenting have other problems that make it so that they are a little skeptical of therapy or scared or don't feel safe. And it's your job as a therapist to do what you can to make them feel safe.
They might be mobsters.
Yeah. Referring to our Dirty John episode, in which we weren't talking about in this episode.
Well, I was talking about The Sopranos.
Oh, and so the way to, you have nice Nike blue shoes.
Yeah, I got these in Colombia of all places.
They are very tall. Those are like 2-inch heels.
Yeah, it has the nice cushiony, and it has a little window that you can see the cushion through.
Do you like to be tall? Is that why you're wearing those things?
No, I like to be cushiony. So seriously, here's the backstory: is I went to buy new walking shoes for my dad.
Yeah.
And he is so particular about what shoes he will and will not wear. So he only wanted black shoes with no frilly stuff on them. And we searched and we searched. We finally found these pair of Nike that is this same model but black, jet black, no white lines or anything. And he tried them on and he's like, "Whoa, these are really comfortable." And I was like, "You know what? I'll try a pair." And I'm like, "Do you have any other color than black?" And like, "Well, we have this blue color, which doesn't sell very well, so it's discounted." And I saw it. I'm like, "Doesn't sell. I love this." So I got him on discount on top of everything else.
Are they really comfortable?
Super comfy.
Huh, maybe I'll buy some.
Yeah.
And they'll be 2 inches taller too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a problem. Parents will do that. But the reason for parents just dropping their kids off is not because parents are assholes and not because parents are in denial of their problems. It's because that our society teaches this. Now, us therapists, we don't teach this, but our society teaches individual therapy. They don't teach family therapy. Our society teaches that kids need help. Our society does not advertise parents need help.
I've seen the movies.
Our society also teaches that when you have a problem in a kid, the parents are 100% to blame. And our society also teaches that parents need to be shamed, that you need to yell at parents and say, like, "You're a terrible parent, you need to change your ways, and you screwed up."
Right.
We've also taught that our society, that unless you have a perfect child, you are a terrible parent. And every parent I talk to has the exact same syndrome of shame of like, no matter how quote unquote good their kid is, they know that their kid has some problems and they're ashamed of themselves as a parent. It's like, oh, you know, or at the very least, they're worried about being scrutinized by other people, or they have been scrutinized by other people. And it's so what I tell people, what I tell therapists is, instead of creating an attitude of us versus them, instead of just being like, well, you know, these parents, they just drop this kid off and they don't, you know, it's up to you as a therapist to do what you can to make that parent feel not only safe, but also that therapy is of value to them.
Right.
And what a lot of therapists do, and what I might have kind of done in the beginning of my career, is I just wanted the parent to come to me and say, please help me. And then I was like, okay, then we can, because some parents do. There's like, please help me. And that's what I was hoping for. But not every parent does that. And so what you have to do is you have to reach out. You have to be like, hey, you know, can I just talk to you for about 10 minutes before I talk with Johnny?
Right.
Bring him into your office, and you have to very quickly lay out that this is a safe place to talk, that I'm very understanding of, you know, that parenting is very complex, and I swear to God, I'll never blame you for problems. You know, people try their best. And also, if you do engage in therapy with me and we do talk, I'm fairly sure that we're going to be able to, I'm going to listen very closely to you, and I'm going to value what you're going to say. And then I'm going to try to think about, maybe throw out some suggestions to maybe help you out with your parenting. I'm guessing that I'm not going to know exactly what to say in those conversations, but I have worked with other parents and had some success in terms of like brainstorming, trial and error. So,
and not all of them end up in jail.
Yeah. And so, you know, now that's a very crude, you know, brief way of trying to connect with a parent and that kind of stuff. But that's not usually what happens. What usually happens is, look, father and mother, we need to talk. You know, there's some issues that you really need to be paying attention to here.
Right.
And, or at least that's the vibe that they get. You know, they got, okay, I finally got a chance to blast these parents about their terrible parenting. They need to recognize that their abuse of this kid is causing the problems, you know? And it's like, yes, but if someone can avoid being chastised by a professional, they're probably going to try to avoid that.
Right. It just rarely works to start off on that foot anyways.
Yeah. Now, I don't know what patron Bridget does. Maybe she does all those things and her families are still rejecting her, and that doesn't feel good. But that doesn't preclude our responsibility to ask for consent to treat. And if you have to, you might have to ease people into it, is the point. Anyway. Okay. One last email here. Oh, this is great. Oh my God. This is so good.
Can't wait.
So I'm not going to say his name because let's not do that. But this is basically a guy who lives nearby Seattle. He was listening to the episode recently in which I was basically reprimanding therapists who refuse to treat LGBTQ clients because of their religion. And the title of the podcast is called "Bigot Therapists."
Ooh.
And I didn't mince words in that podcast. Now, what I did talk about in that podcast was that the podcast was not an indictment on Christianity, because according to research, the majority of Christians actually support gay marriage, and so that's changed over the last 20 years.
Sure.
So, you know, but currently, you could almost say that the anti-gay thing in Christianity is a minority. At the very least, it will be the minority if trends continue, which they likely will. And so I wasn't saying that Christian therapists are bigoted. What I was saying is that there are bigoted therapists, and some of them happen to be Christian. Some of them also happen to be Jewish, and some of them happen to be Muslim, and some of them happen to be Jehovah's Witness, and some of them happen to be atheists. There are bigoted therapists across. But in Christianity and in Islam, there are certain notions that are thrown around that that make it more likely that a therapist in that area is going to exhibit bigotry against and discrimination and weird ideas about LGBTQ people. So that's what I was talking about in that episode. So he writes, "Dear Dr. Kirk Honda, since I live a mere 70 miles or so from Seattle, I think it's safe to say that I understand your region of the country to some extent. Before moving here, I lived in Boston and Chicago. Chicago in particular had a huge gay pride parade. One lesbian attending the parade loved, in all caps, loved shoving people's faces in her perversion. What? She wore a T-shirt decorated with the words, 'Taste the Rainbow.' It was obvious that it had nothing to do with Skittles candies because it also had a huge arrow pointing towards her crotch. Talk about tasteless." What do you think about that so far, Berto?
They were triggered by these things. It was just occurring to me that when I was a kid, I remember being in my school bus talking to this little friend of mine she was my school bus mate for years. So every morning and every afternoon we would always talk. And I think we must have been early teenagers, like maybe 12 or so. And she was saying something about like kissing a penis or something, you know? And I was like so grossed out. I'm like, oh, who would ever do that, you know? And I just remember that notion in my head of like, oh, who would ever want to kiss a penis? It was so disgusting. But I get the sense like some people never grow out of these feelings of disgust, you know?
Yeah, it's like taste the rainbow, you know, and pointing towards your crotch. And it's like, you realize people have oral sex.
Yeah, left and right all the time.
Yeah, heterosexuals, homosexuals.
But they find it really threatening to see that sign for some reason.
Yeah, what if, and you know, let's be honest, it's culturally considered to be crude or rated R or something.
And certainly in front of children, you don't want like to be overtly talking about sexuality and stuff like that.
But yeah, one of the things that I always hear from bigoted people against LGBTQ people, or I often hear, is they'll bring up gay pride parade stuff. And I'm always like, you realize it's a pride parade. It's just a parade. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? What they'll always say is like, why do they have to flaunt it so much? And it's like, well, you know, if you had like a military parade, you wouldn't, and its purpose was to aggrandize the military. You wouldn't be like, why do they have to, you know, why do they have to show us those faces? You know,
show us those missiles.
Yeah, or you know, why do they have to have all those soldiers in those uniforms?
Actually, you just bring up a really interesting point. Think offensiveness wise. Imagine, you know, we have these parades all the time where they have their guns. Sometimes they do 21 gun salutes where they're shooting weapons, right? And this is all like, oh, great, it's so awesome. These guns that kill. It's so great to see these in my face.
Yeah.
Oh. She's got an arrow pointing downstairs.
Yeah.
That's so offensive.
Yeah, what if you're a Native American and your ancestors were killed by the American military? What if you're like me as a Japanese American and the American military imprisoned your family members for years during World War II? You know, I understand when I watch military and parades that, you know, that's not what they're saying, you know what I mean? And so...
They're not celebrating those things. They're just saying, hey, we're part of this country and we defend it and blah, blah.
Yeah. Quote unquote, defend it. Yeah. But the point is anyway, that.
But if we don't have a problem with military parades.
Yeah. But it's the other thing is anyway, it just always kind of boggles me. It's like there's this, I don't know if it's the internet or whatever, but there's this kind of like go-to thing about if you want to bring up a case against LGBTQ people, you gotta insert the gay pride in there somewhere, because you gotta. To them it's a slam dunk example, because this guy who's writing into me is like trying to say, look, being gay, there's something wrong with it, right? And it's like, look, if you look at gay pride parade, it's like, well, by that logic, any heterosexual that does anything bad that you don't like is an indictment on being heterosexual. You know, it's like,
Right. Like, let's say, even if we said, yeah, gay pride parades go a little far, they're too graphic or whatever, somehow that is now an indictment on the entire community.
Right.
Yeah.
And to that, I'll say, I let people off the hook a little bit, because if you're unfamiliar with gay people and you happen to be exposed to the gay pride parade, it's not hard to say, oh, is this how all gay people are? Is this how they're all the time? Yeah. Anyway, so he goes on. Your show, Bigot Therapists, starts out by criticizing therapists who refuse to work with LGBTQ clients. It seems clear to me that your perspective is skewed by the fact that Dan Savage is from Seattle.
What?
Yeah. So
wait a minute.
Yeah. So he's basically saying that because Dan Savage is from Seattle and Dan Savage is a pro-gay person, that I have adopted Dan Savage's point of view, because
we talk about Dan Savage frequently on this podcast.
Yeah.
Not only that, I was certainly not against Dan Savage when he was pissing progressives like myself off for saying that we were part of the problem in the last election. But anyways, that's a different topic.
Right. I mean, I've been listening, or I've been reading Dan Savage's columns since the early
college,
90s.
Yeah.
But I'm not that into Dan Savage because there's I'm just not.
But
super entertained.
why would that be why you have this?
Yeah, exactly. But again, if you're in a certain cultural pocket in the right echo chamber, they will grab certain things. You know,
sure.
The gay pride parade, and maybe Dan Savage is one of those things that they grab because they have quotes from him saying things that they like to quote. Who knows?
Look, I've experienced this a few times in my life regarding Hispanic culture, where there's all sorts of things that you see in movies or shows where you might have the Hispanic party, and they might be playing a mariachi band or something, right? And it's from Mexico, right? And it's loud. It's like, oh, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So I've actually literally had people tell me like, you guys are so loud, right? Or tell me like, oh, you guys and your mariachis. And in Colombia, there's no mariachis at all, right? Only Mexican mariachi bands are mariachis in Colombia. Right. But these are things that because people see one filter, like a movie thing or something, then they assume that entire population is a homogeneous way.
Right. So because I'm pro LGBT, or because I'm an ally of LGBTQ people, I must be like indoctrinated by Dan Savage.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's so weird. Okay, but you're going to love this bit.
Okay. It gets better.
And he says, and oh yeah, the fact that your Facebook page shows a photo of you and another man.
Oh, yes.
I'm guessing that he isn't your brother or just a colleague.
Oh, Salacious D. We should start a band calling it Salacious D.
The fact that your Facebook page shows a photo of you and another man.
That's hot.
And I'm guessing that he's not your brother and he's not just a colleague.
Oh, we're brothers, all right.
I mean,
I love it.
It couldn't get any better than that.
That is so awesome.
One, like,
that's awesome.
What does that have to do with it? And
well,
two,
no, that's clearly why you're biased.
And two, like, wow.
Right?
Like, because there's a picture of two men.
Well, it is actually, in all seriousness, this is one of the big problems in the world, right? That I don't think that's too hyperbolic. Think about all the reasons why we get into aggressive conflict, right? There's this microcosm that it's so threatening to see two men like close to each other or appearing to be friendly or touching. They're touching.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Are you guys brothers?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man.
He goes on. He talks about some show or documentary called Indoctrination University or something. And it says that it unveils the intellectual corruption of American universities by faculty activists
who have turned America's classrooms into indoctrination centers for their political causes. It describes how academic radicals with little regard for professional standards or pluralistic foundations of American society have created an ideological curriculum that it is at odds with the traditional purposes of a democratic education. Well, to this writer-inner, I would say, to some extent, I agree with you. There are abuses of faculty that I have witnessed firsthand in which they will, in a sense, punish in a very real way in terms of like, because you don't agree with my political views, I am now going to give you a bad grade. In cases where I don't think that is best and right and just. And so to this I say, humans are flawed and they're gonna do stuff that isn't great all the time.
But hold on, sorry. How did we get from I'm refusing to treat someone?
Well, so let me explain, because I didn't explain the whole thing, was that these were trainees in programs and the faculty were basically forcing these trainees to change their point of view.
I see.
Saying you have to, it's unethical for you to discriminate against gay people. So we're going to put you through this remediation program to try to get you to change your mind on that.
I see.
And these trainees refused to do that. They got kicked out of the program, and then they sued, and there's various different results. But
I have a question. It is clearly wrong to steal. It is clearly wrong to speak ill of your father and mother. It is definitely wrong to murder. It is really wrong to have out of marriage anything, right? Adultery is a no-no. Do they not treat any of those people either?
Right. Well, so yeah, and exactly. They would say it's more complicated that you have to listen to the whole episode,
Sure.
but at any rate, so yeah, there are abuses faculty. If for some reason, because right now, something like 80% of university faculty are Democrats, are liberals, and so yeah, but if it was the opposite, then the liberals would be complaining about how the universities had all these right-wing professors imposing their points. It's just it's a problem, and it needs to be talked about. On any side, on any point of view. Like, professors have power, and with power comes basically abuse of power at times.
Yeah.
And I've probably been guilty of that myself at times. Not in this way, but probably in other ways. It's just part of the thing, and yeah, we should reflect on that. But there's a difference between that problem that happens sometimes and the cases in which I brought up. The main one, the good one, the Jennifer Keaton one, is where, and someone actually pointed out on YouTube, I think, that Jennifer Keaton was, the youngest sibling in the TV show with Michael J. Fox.
Wait, was she really?
There was the Keaton family.
Oh, not this. Okay, two different people, but the name is the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's a character name in the
Alex
TV show.
Keaton was Michael J. Fox's character.
Yeah.
So Jennifer Keaton must have been his sister.
There were two sisters. One was Justine Bateman.
Oh.
I forget her name.
Okay.
Anyway, the point is Jennifer Keaton, real person. She refused to work with with a gay man. Or someone she thought to be gay. And she also had talked about how she believed that being gay was immoral. She also talked about she had some interest in conversion therapy. And she said the reason why she didn't want to treat this person was because she couldn't condone, if the person said to her, look, I'd like you to help me with my relationships. I'd like you to help me enhance my relationship with this other man.
Right.
And she said that she couldn't do that because it was against her religion. And she said that she might even try to convince him otherwise or something like that. And so what the program did is they said that, look, you're entitled to your belief system. If that's what you believe, that's fine. But if you want to be a counselor, according to our ethical codes and our
Right.
accreditation standards, that is not the standard of care. You don't. That's not what counselors do in this profession. You don't impose your religious beliefs on another person. That's
Right.
just, if we allowed that, imagine all the other weird religious beliefs that would be infused into the counseling office. You're a professional.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, like seriously. So, okay, to be weirdly fair to their position, I think in their minds they're sort of looking at it like, look, if a murderer comes to me and says, I want your help on how to murder people.
Right.
Certainly, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
They actually sort of equate it. They're like,
Yeah.
well, I'm not going to. But the flip side of that is, so what if someone comes in and says, like, they're just talking. They're like, yeah, I love shrimp. I love eating shellfish. Are you going to be like, oh, I can't treat you anymore?
Right.
Because, what if it's related to food addiction, right? And one of the things I love eating is seafood of all sorts, including shellfish. Like, well, that's against my religion. I can't help you with that.
Right.
Right? Like, that's the kind of thing it is.
Right. And so, plus, it's freaking ridiculous. We still have people in our society who consider LGBTQ lifestyle, as they put it, to be immoral, especially, as I said, because our society has changed on this, and Christians have changed too. So it's such an obvious conclusion when you look at you'd be hard pressed not to know of at least the TV present, like Ellen DeGeneres. It's hard to look at Ellen DeGeneres and go like, she's a degenerate.
She's an evil. Yeah, she's a degenerate.
It's like, oh, I get it. Gay people are just like me.
Right.
They just happen to be attracted to people of the same sex. No fucking big deal.
Right.
So the fact that we still have people like that is ridiculous, and they need to stop it.
A lot of it, I think, is it's the sex angle, right? Because theoretically, in some of these belief systems, sex, you really only are supposed to have sex with your married partner, right? And even then, nothing too crazy. Yeah. So as soon as you're like, well, I'm gay, then immediately like, well, so you're definitely being an adulterer because you're having all sorts of crazy, illegally sexy things outside of a marriage.
Right.
That's not good.
Right.
And that is really tied into it.
Yeah, I get it. And grow up, just think it's a logical conclusion that gay marriage is totally fine. It's a logical conclusion that people should be allowed to do what they want to with their sex life and their marriage life. You know, like if you don't like it, fine. If you think it's gross, fine. If you think it's a sin, fine. But it's illogical. It's not logical. No one is being harmed.
Right.
And
Consenting adults.
yeah, it's just so dumb, And so anyway, so he goes on. Should therapists work with gay people? Well, that depends on whether or not. I will say that his email. Part of the reason why I'm reading it is because he's actually not like a raving lunatic like a lot of the people on the internet. He's actually like making his case.
Yeah, like you and I being in a photo together. That's salacious D.
Should therapists work with gay people? Well, that depends on whether or not they have spinelessly capitulated to modern trends, he says. I have serious issues with he says he's actually, so I'll just summarize what he's saying. He says he has issues with conversion therapy being forced on people, but what about people who genuinely want to change? And I actually, to some extent, understand the debate here. I mean, if you have someone who, say they're Christian or Muslim or whatever religion that says that they can't be gay, and they, are going, oh my gosh, I'm gay. I want to not be gay anymore. And they go to a therapist and they say, I would like you to help me not be gay. It's an interesting thought experiment for me.
Sure.
Because I believe in client autonomy. If someone says, I've had clients who have come to me for things that I did not agree with, but I treated them for that because they were really asking for it, and I I started out for the first number of sessions going like, you realize you don't have to do that, right?
Sure.
Like, for instance, I had a client who came to me to stop his quote unquote porn addiction, even though he only looked at porn like once every 6 months or something.
Oh, wow.
and he considered it like this terrible thing, and he wanted to stop.
Yeah.
And so I spent a number of sessions just trying to like normalize sexual activity and normalize, I guess, pornography viewing, or talk about options of pornography viewing, ethical pornography viewing or something, because there are such things, in my opinion. And at the end of that, he's like, nope, I get what you're saying. And and it's illuminating to think about outside the cultural box here for a second, but no, I don't want to look at porn anymore. And it's harming my marriage and I need your help. And so politically, I was not on board with that. Yeah. Politically, I'm like, look, you look at porn every once in a while, you masturbate. There's something wrong with that, like just talk it over with your wife and maybe you guys can work something out, tell her that you love her and you're never going to leave her. And like,
but the thing he was asking you wasn't in some obvious ways going to harm him or others near him, like it's one thing, like if a client comes and says, I mean, obviously, like if a client comes to you and says, I want you to help me gain 600 pounds. Like you might have actual ethical problems with that because that could literally lead to their death.
Right.
Right.
Well, yeah, but that's not directly analogous to a Christian who thinks she's going to hell because if she engages in homosexual activity and she wants your help. Now, I've never been faced with that situation. No one has ever come to me with that goal. So I don't know what I would do.
I guess, I mean, I was just trying to say that if we are to believe, if we are to stand on a pedestal and say, look, your choices sexually are your choices, we need to be able to respect the choices in either direction.
Right.
And then, like to your point, help inform. There's nothing wrong with being gay. There's, it's healthy if that's how you feel. But if they still want to be one way or the other, and it's not like I need your help me, convince me to inject heroin daily or convince me to kill some people. Like these are obviously wrong things.
Yeah, it's a different kind of realm.
Yeah.
Now, again, eventually we're going to get to a place in our society where no one will ask for this because we won't have a society that shames it is my prediction. No one's going to in 50 years, no one in America is going to go to therapy and say, please convert me from being gay, because our society will fully embrace both sexual orientations.
That could be. I also sort of look at it like if someone comes to you or just in general and they're like, I think I want to be a different gender. Like I'm a male, I want to be a female. I need your help making that transition. Is that right? Wrong? That's what they're saying they want to do, right? These are. I mean, it's not obvious, right? But until and if you have a perfect test that could determine if that's ultimately healthy or unhealthy, like that's what they want to do. They're telling you they want to switch sexes,
right? So, in my view, if you go over all the cultural reasons as to why this or that is happening. Let me give you actually another example that I talked about in a recent episode in which I had a client who was in a heterosexual relationship and had kids, and at that point realized that they had they realized, I think I'm actually gay.
Yeah.
And they came to me and they wanted me to help them to not be gay. Right. They wanted me to not to not be gay, but to refrain from engaging in extramarital affairs that happen to be with same-sex people. And so in that situation, again, I was like, oh, well, but we first should have a conversation about, is that the best goal for you? Because maybe another goal is divorce and be more congruent with your sexuality. And so we talked about that for a long time. But in the end, he said, I don't want a divorce. Right. I love my wife. I love my kids, and so I need you to help me to not do X,
And
Y,
that's
Z.
important. I mean, another thing is like we're talking about it, and I know we're like massively simplifying it as if it's the Peanuts model of psychiatry and psychology, where Lucy's there on her stand, and someone comes by and says, "Here's a nickel. I need you to do this very specific thing for me." But at least the way I've experienced therapy in my life, the real value I've gotten wasn't, "Hey, I have this one specific problem. I need you to solve it for me."
Yeah.
It was like, I got a whole bunch of stuff. I need help just thinking through it, and talking. And,
right. It's an exploration, and the therapist often is just sort of a sounding board, or someone who is with someone as you journey through your own mind.
It's not like you can wave a magic wand and turn people into frogs when they want.
Right. So anyway, this guy brings up a point of like, what about people who actually don't want to be gay and they want conversion therapy? To each individual, I will say, to each individual client, I have sympathies for that.
Yeah.
But as a society, the larger, and that gets into a weird debatable thing about client autonomy and like the ethics of doing something to someone that isn't good for them overall.
Yeah.
But the overarching thing that needs to happen is our society needs to continue to progress, and the percentage of Christians who are no longer bigoted against LGBTQ people needs to continue to increase. What am I saying here? The bigotry has to go away.
Yeah.
And then this won't even be an issue, is the thing.
There's also an elephant in the room to address, which is that it's one thing to have a reasonable debate about, look, should we as therapists, I'm not a therapist, but should you guys as therapists look at stats and data and research to help guide you into making more balanced and ethical choices with your patients, right? That seems reasonable, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to, should we use private feelings and beliefs that by definition have no proof?
Right. And are not shared by the majority of other people in the profession.
To dictate what we do or don't do. That's a very different thing.
Right.
What if I'm a flat earther?
Yeah.
And a patient comes and says they're afraid of flying.
Yeah.
And my treatment is about convincing them that the world's flat.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. And, anyway, so that's what he was saying there. And then he also says that St. Paul addressed the issue of homosexuality. In Romans 1, Paul cites homosexuality as degrading and a judgment of God. If you're not a Christian, I still suggest, this is him saying to me, if you're not a Christian, I still suggest that you read the book of Romans in order to avoid your own bigotry, he says.
No, that is a good point. Actually, and in all fairness, I think we should also read in Harry Potter 2, do you remember the chapter when they're in with the basilisk? There's a little bit of a bromance going on between, I think we should read that as well. That one is also an important chapter to read.
He said, have you said all of that? Let me add this. God loves gay people, just as God loves all sinners. So,
which God are we talking about?
So that's what he says there. Yeah, again, this is not an indictment on this is not an indictment on Christianity. If this is your point of view, if you think that being gay is a sin, then great. It's a ridiculous point of view. I'm just going to label it like that. There's a lot of wonderful things about Christianity. For instance, giving to the poor, love, humility, forgiveness. There's a lot of wonderful things about Christianity. Community.
It's really hard to argue against those.
Family.
Like you have to work hard to make those bad.
Yeah. Being a good person, not lying, supporting your family, respecting your elders, living a healthy life, not being angry. There's a lot of wonderful things about Christianity that is really the majority of my experience of what sermons are about and what the core Christian value in terms of what I've experienced and what I define as. There just happens to be people in our society and around the world who are extremely uncomfortable with LGBTQ people.
Yeah.
And they look for justification for that discomfort. And they turn to their religion because their religion happens to have some passages in the Bible that actually provide justification for their discomfort. And then they dig their heels in and they echo chamber and they turn it into a political thing. And then they email me about it when I talk about these issues. And the thing is that, I get it, but it's got to change. Go to your core Christian values. Jesus literally said, you cannot judge another human being. That is not your job. And you don't know, pal, is basically what Jesus was saying. It's like, stop evaluating other people's sin and unsin.
Don't throw those rocks. By the way, something that doesn't work is quoting a book that you believe in, but the person that you're quoting it to or the group may not believe it in. So like when you quote certain verses from this, the equivalent would be, imagine for this person or someone, if someone quotes them a verse from the Quran, right? What effect does that have on them?
Yeah.
Right?
But that's their world, and I get it. That's the Bible to this fellow is an important document and perhaps the Word of God. I don't know. And, I get it. And so I went back and forth with him for a little bit and basically just tried to engage him in a succinct conversation about things. And he wasn't a jerk. And that's part of the reason why I'm reading the email is because I get daily horrific. Some of them are trolls, but some of them are not trolls. They're just really politically charged, angry people who write to me things. And then when I respond to them, they either don't reply back or they just come back with even more vitriol and just more insults or something. This one was, I think he was trying to explain something to me. And there's some insult talk in there, but it's not, believe me, as bad as other stuff I get. And so if you're listening out there, person who wrote this, I hope that our response is not hurtful to you. I'm guessing that some of the things I said, at the very least, were hurtful. That's not the tone that I want to propagate. I totally respect people having their point of view. I totally respect their religious point of view. But when your point of view and your behavior makes other innocent human beings feel like shit, or makes other human beings, innocent human beings, it limits their freedoms or keeps them oppressed or unfairly takes away power that they deserve, then I'm going to say stuff about that. I'm going to say that belief that motivates that behavior has got to change. I'm going to say that. And in 50 years, 100 years, I am positive that people are going to look back on this and be like, wasn't it interesting that in 2017, there was this weird group of people that had this very strange point of view about LGBTQ people. There were people, and to some extent still are, but mainstream individuals in the mid-1800s who used the Bible to justify their racist beliefs about black people being slaves. That's the thing about these kinds of people who write in, that I just wish they would just take a history class and really focus on that kind of stuff, because it doesn't take a genius to draw connections between these two things. There were people that used the Bible to justify whites and blacks not getting married, that justified blacks staying as slaves, that justified the privilege and the superiority of white people, that justified laws, that justified, there were people that did that. And when we look back on that, we're like, well, that's ridiculous. That's not Christian. They weren't real Christians. Right. Real Christians, recognize that black people are equal. What's wrong with those Christians back then? Well, the wrongness is that they were uncomfortable with something, and they started looking around for something to hold on to justify their discomfort. And religion, because the Bible is fairly ambiguous. If you've ever read the Bible, there's a lot of ways to interpret what's in there. There's a lot of parable, an analogy, and and it's pretty rare that the Bible just comes out and says this or that, And when it does, sometimes it gets a little weird, like your hairstyle has to be a certain way or something. And so that happened in the mid 1800s. And when we look back at that, we think, well, those weren't real Christians and they were confused and they're completely outmoded. That, very few Christians today, if you polled them, would say, yes, it should be illegal for blacks and whites to get married, or there's still a percentage, but it's very much the minority. Well, that's where we're headed with LGBTQ issues with Christians. That every year the percentage gets more and more in favor of justice.
Yeah,
and I think right now, even among evangelical Christians, it's something like 50% support gay marriage among evangelical Christians. Methodists, Catholics, it's even higher. It's something like 80% or something. Jehovah's Witnesses is like very low. They're still like 30%, but still, but every year it just gets higher and higher. And so eventually attitudes like this, right or inner, I just have to tell you, they're not going to look very good in the annals of history in 100 years.
Yeah.
Any final word, Bruno?
I grew up in Colombia for my first 15 years, mostly in Catholic country. I went to a Catholic school. Man, being gay or saying anything that would have made it look like you were in any way gay would have been one of the worst things you could have done. Oh, there were a couple of kids in the class that everyone believed they were probably gay, and I mean, one of them didn't get picked on that much because he was the second tallest kid in the class, but the other one did. And in general, like, just gays were something that we would laugh at because it was the funny guy in the movie that was outrageous, and no one would ever be like that in real life. And that was the thing. It was not okay at all.
Right.
I never knew anyone, of course there were, but at the time, that was gay or would have been gay. That would have been inconceivable.
Right.
Marriage, that question wouldn't have even come up at all because you wouldn't have got past the gate of being gay in the first place. And that was in the 80s. Mm-hmm. I was very anti-gay in high school. I mean, not that I did anything actively about it. It's just if you would have asked me, I'm like, ugh, gross, disgusting. I can't do that, whatever. It took me actually debating in youth group, having debates, because they would set up these debates about different things. And I would always like to play devil's advocate just to play devil's advocate. You know me. And I would start making arguments that I didn't initially believe in, but to try to screw the other side up. And one of the arguments I made was that they were saying, like, look, it's not natural. And I would have said that. It's not natural. But then I was like, well, okay. And then I was playing devil's advocate. Well, but dogs do it. And I remember the entire youth group like cracked up laughing like I was saying something totally ridiculous. But in my mind, I was like, that's one of the most logical things I've said. And then I realized, wait a minute. And that started like getting me to question my own assumptions. I'm like, wait, what is this not natural thing?
I've never heard you tell this story before.
Yeah.
Was the exercise to actually have a debate?
Yeah. We were in youth group. We were having debates about different topics. One of them was homosexuality.
They were open to
yeah,
legitimizing gay relationships?
No. This wasn't about relationship. I see what you mean. Just gay relationships, not marriage. It wasn't that far into it. The topic was homosexuality.
And their stance
and
was,
there was a debate, and this was,
and the leaders were like, well,
let's debate it.
It's debatable. Was that their stance, or was their stance of let's further justify our anti-gay attitude?
This was a very progressive
Interesting.
church.
I wonder if the leaders actually were trying to influence you guys.
It might have been
to be less anti-gay.
It might have been, because why would you even allow, quote unquote, that debate?
Right.
So we had that debate, and I remember in that debate, I started questioning my own things.
Do you know the leaders? Are you in contact with them?
No, I'm not. But I remember what they look like, and I would know how to find out who they were.
I would ask them if you can.
That's a good question, actually.
Because if they were pro-gay, you could be like, you know what?
You moved a life.
I just want to tell you.
Well, that's actually, I'm going to do that. I'm going to follow your advice on that, because the truth is, and then, it took me several years, early years in college, to finally find like where my thought was actually on this whole thing. Partially was from not knowing people directly that at least I knew were gay, and partially was the religious upbringing. And then there was also the, like I was saying, just when you're young, you tend to find things that you're not familiar with, stranger and weirder and things. And then I remember finally at some point it all just like clicked, and I was like, oh, why does it matter to me?
Right.
Like, this is so dumb.
Right. And it didn't take much, let's just put it that way. And you had a lot of reasons to continue the bigotry. And that's my contention. It's like, it's not a big ask.
Yeah.
Like, and it won't even affect your fucking life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To this guy who's writing in, it's like, for you to change your mind about gay people, it won't change anything about your life. Like, you probably don't know a soul who's LGBTQ in apparently in your circle.
Well, you probably do and don't know it, but either way, it's not affecting you.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't ask you to do anything.
Yeah.
It's just change your attitude. No big deal. And that's what happened to you. You're just like, I guess that attitude's weird. Why was I like that?
Yeah, exactly.
Because again, it's logical.
Yeah.
And to work against logic, to work against such an easy transition, to work against empathy, to work against goodness, to work against right, to work against justice, you have to actually put effort into it, in my opinion. And for the last bastion of bigotry in our society that is still anti-LGBTQ people, well, the Q thing, or the T and the Q thing, we're still working on, but at least the LGB thing, maybe the B thing is still kind of, at least the L and the G is to still be bigoted against that. In our society, given Ellen, given Will and Grace, given all the other things, I just have to say, like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah. In fact, I just saw an article today saying there might be a Star Wars gay storyline coming up. And the title of the article was, or maybe the person who posted it was saying, would JJ Abrams dare go this far, or something like that? And I was thinking, why is this still a question?
Yeah. The same thing happened in the last Star Trek movie. Did you know that they made Sulu into a gay man?
Oh, right.
So the actor who played Sulu in the original
is gay. Yeah.
But they had John Cho, the guy who's playing it now.
Yeah.
They had him, they revealed in a kind of a one-off sort of shot.
Oh, I don't remember. I didn't see the last Star Trek.
There was a minor kerfuffle, but it wasn't as big as you would think. Which was kind of nice, because it's like, okay, because 10 years ago it would have been a huge deal. Yeah. And today it's like just kind of a deal.
Well, what's her name? She, the Harry Potter writer, she revealed that Dumbledore was gay.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that did cause quite a stir.
Yeah. So she revealed it like outside of the books or something? Or?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Like, if it's not in the books, then...
Well, you could claim there were little hints in there, but the truth is that she just basically came out and established that Dumbledore is gay.
Interesting.
Now, it is telling of the time when she wrote it and all these things, that if he was gay, he was probably in the closet.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's what she came out and revealed.
That's such, I mean, I have to say, I like it. I like that she's basically, the few people, the always that happens in these situations, it's like, there's a fair amount of Harry Potter fans that are anti-gay.
J.K. Rowling, yeah.
And so when Rowling comes up and says this, there's a percentage that they're going to have to wrestle with that.
Right.
And they're going to have to say, well, I hate gay people, but I love Dumbledore. So, and it could be that moment for the same for you. And so I like it. Right. But on the other hand, I'm like, that's kind of a weird thing to reveal that doesn't have any indication in the storyline, right? Like there's no hints that Dumbledore had a boyfriend or a husband or...
Well, so not that directly, but he certainly has no female There's no
Yeah.
indication he ever had a female thing.
Well, there was
And
no
he did-
romantic talk at all from
Well,
him.
there is a lot of talk about the deep relationship he had with Grindelwald, and like again, this is the kind of thing you would do when the guy was in the closet, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that she was bold enough to write in the gay, but that was sort of like hard to do. So I don't know if she did it as a way to sort of make a stance,
Like later on.
or if she was like, no, that's how I wrote him. But
she was like, well, this is a book for kids, but is Dumbledore gay? I could see her like trying to, is he gay?
Right.
Is he straight? You know what? I'm gonna make him gay.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna
Right.
because I'm sure as she was writing the book, she's like, should I write in like a backstory for Dumbledore having a wife?
Right.
Or I'm guessing that ran through her mind, and I could see that. If that's true, then I respect her revealing later on.
But to be fair, there might be an article that explains all of this that I haven't read.
But if she just tacked it on at the end, just like, you know what, I'm gonna make Dumbledore gay, whereas before I didn't really make him anything because he didn't really have a romantic storyline,
But in all honesty, like, sadly, right? But if she had injected that into those books, I have a feeling that would have hurt her franchise.
Yeah,
because
totally.
Too many parents would have been outraged.
Well, the fact that a lot of Christian families allowed Harry Potter to be read anyway,
right? That's surprising.
Because there's a certain section of Christianity that abhors anything related or suggestive of magic because it's like, I remember when I don't know if you remember, but there was a section of Christians who hated Star Wars because it talked about the Force.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And no talk about God. And then I remember other Christians saying, well, it is God. It's just in another galaxy far, far away. That's what they call God.
Yeah.
They call it the Force. You have
I
to
love how we're getting upset about a fictional, like, oh my gosh. Like this thing that took place in a galaxy far, that's not jiving with our book.
But there's a history of really trying to avoid infiltration or focusing on non-Christian things. Like there's still, again, a percentage, it's rather small, of Christians who refuse to do yoga because they believe that it's associated with religion. Yeah, because it kind of is.
Oh, I see. And then there's the whole D&D backlash that happened.
Right.
And my understanding is J.R.R. Tolkien and the guy who wrote
C.S.
the Chronicle
Lewis.
and C.S. Lewis would get into these debates because C.S. Lewis would try to convince him. He's like, why do you write these things? Because in some way, writing this whole epic fantasy thing was a totally different history to the Christian
and there's a very distinct pantheon that you probably don't know about because you're
from the Silmarillion.
Oh, so you do know about it.
I didn't read it. I watched like a 6-hour video on YouTube about it.
Yeah, I mean there's a head god.
Yeah.
And then there are like kind of like these angels.
Right.
And Gandalf is actually one of them.
Yeah. And this is not it's not a one-to-one parallel at all. It's its own thing.
But it's definitely not in the Christian world,
Yeah.
So and it's not even necessarily but C.S. Lewis was overtly Christian analogy.
Yeah, his book is an allegory about Christ, right?
Yeah.
Which I've also not read, but whatever.
Oh, I have. Aslan, you see the movies.
Nah.
Oh. Well, Aslan the
all I know is that there's a talking lion.
Yeah, the talking lion is God.
Yeah.
And there's actually a scene where Aslan sacrifices himself and is tortured and killed.
See, it sounds familiar.
And the earth shakes and all this kind of stuff. And so yeah. How did we get on this topic? So that was that episode in which we read random emails. If you out there want to ask Berto and I random short questions, we would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because it's easier to respond to those than some of the big ones.
Yeah, they turn up into short little episodes.
That does it for that short little episode of Psychology in the Shadow. Thanks for joining us out there. Please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.